you may not want to take one with you, but that's what I believe. If you need to go before 12:30, that's fine. I know Sunday lunchtimes and things is all right, so Kit will be joining us in a few minutes, I think. So, how can we love ourselves as Christians? And I've been pondering this really since Elizabeth announced that we were going to be looking at, this is our theme this year. Because in the work I do in spiritual direction, it comes up a lot about loving ourselves. And we trip off, love your neighbour as yourself. And we're probably taught, actually, not to love ourselves implicitly in Christian faith. So I've been looking out on TV, newspaper articles, different things about loving ourselves. And if you're a reader of the newspaper or online articles or whatever, you will know that there are an awful lot of self-help things around. And particularly at weekends in the press, I think, how to do this and how to that, how to be a better this and how to be a better that. And I've been sort of collecting examples of that, and two examples that are from the Guardian. One was struggling to feel like I matter in any area of my life. That was the headline. And I'm sure lots of people perhaps feel that. And the advice for that was, you matter, not because of how many people you help or what roles you play, but simply because you are you. Remind yourself of that as often as you need. So, good advice. And in another article, why we should stop wishing we were special and celebrate being ordinary. That pressure, and I think perhaps young people in particular in school, you've got to be the best and the greatest and celebrity and all the rest of it. And the response to that one was, real self-confidence comes from knowing and being oneself and feeling loved for that in an ordinary way. Understand that you have value for being you. The desire to be special can be exhausting. So there's plenty of good advice out there, and it's not mentioning any particular faith at all, but looking at our humanity. And it doesn't really acknowledge the source of love and how this relates to our inner self, our souls. And we know as Christians that we have our bodies, our minds, and our souls. So all these articles, when I read them, tend to have something missing. You're sort of crying out to say, but you've got a greater force out there, there's some help. But as I mentioned earlier, there's that looking after ourselves, which is perhaps counterintuitive in our Christian faith. Because as a very young person, we're taught not to be selfish. We have to share, we have to give up, we have to help. And all quite rightly so. I'm sure those of us with children, grandchildren, godchildren have all tried to set examples doing that. Selfishness is something that we're taught from an early age to avoid. And there's a phrase that's very much in common parlance at the moment. You deserve it. Do it because you deserve it. And TV ads teem with it. You deserve it. Go and help yourself to this. Have that. You deserve it. Do we? And that's something, I'm sure we've said it to ourselves. I know I sometimes say to myself, right, I will have that biscuit now. I deserve it. I need some sugar. But perhaps we're serving ourselves incorrectly. And we often see people accused of loving themselves too much, as Mark referred to in his sermon. And we've got some very international examples of that going on at the moment.
Remember that next time.
And it's not helpful when we're trying to instill in young people that what it is to be loving our neighbour and ourselves. But we also see people who lack confidence and self-esteem, and there are many, many youngsters in our schools in that situation. And again, Mark referred to that with COVID, and that very young children just did not have the normal structures that help them to operate as humans. And sadly, there are many that, and including teenagers, who feel that life isn't worth living. So there's something's gone wrong about how we look after ourselves. And we know that Jesus taught us to live life in all its fullness, and he told us to love our neighbour as ourselves. But if we don't love ourselves, we're not actually in a very good position to show love to others, because love is something that, like the light shining, shines out of us. But if our hearts are heavy and we're feeling dark inside and troubled, then it's going to be very difficult to love other people. And in practice, we may not love appropriately because it's not flowing. So how can we love ourselves? Well, as I said, I've been on the lookout for how we love ourselves and collecting up ideas. And I think it was about 3 Sundays ago, we sang the hymn, "Will you come and follow me if I but call your name?" Mm-hmm. And that just so spoke to me in that service. It was just bow. And it was verse 4 that leapt out. And I hope people who were around me didn't think I was being terrible getting my phone out, but I was capturing it before I lost it. Joey may have seen me do it. Verse 4 says, "Will you love the you hide if I but call your name? Will you quell the fear inside and never be the same? Will you use the faith you found to reshape the world around through my sight and touch and sound in you and you in me?" And that just so spoke to me about the love we must have for ourselves. Will we quell the fear inside and never be the same? Will we love the you hide? Do we actually show who we really are to those people that we love and work with? And I know in funerals sometimes when we hear eulogies, I've made this comment, I didn't know that about so-and-so. Now, it's not that they perhaps hid that you that they had, but maybe it wasn't allowed to shine through, or we didn't know them in that way, because we are so complex. There's so much about us that can shine through if we really can love who we are, the person that God made us. And so some scripture references. Isaiah chapter 43 was what came to mind with that hymn. "Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name, and you are mine." That's used in the confirmation service as well. And in the New Testament, Jesus described himself as a good shepherd who calls his own sheep by name. We are known, we're called by name. Not just a group of us here at St Mary's, we're not called by St Mary's, we're called by Jill, Rowena and Shira. So it goes on. It's all of our individuality. And we belong to God regardless of our response. So we're in that flock, and we may not want to be hearing the shepherd's voice, but we're in it. And we're loved by God, our Creator. And on a day like today, in a week that we've had in terms of spring and the weather, I think it's easier for us to connect to knowing that we're perhaps held by our Creator. Our hearts have been lifted, and there's something there about that being made in the image of God. And then Psalm 139 also reminds us of how we're known by God. "For you yourself created my inmost parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I thank you that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvellous are your works, my soul knows well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and woven in the depths of the earth." We are marvellously and wonderfully made, aren't we? I know things go wrong. We've had COVID to contend with, and bits of our bodies don't work as well as they do. But I'm sure I've said this to you before. Bill Bryson wrote a book about the body and how it works. And I tell you, it's an absolute miracle that we're all here. Because there's so many things that can go wrong with our bodies. The chemistry, it's just absolutely astonishing and amazing that us human beings, and animals and flowers and so on, but we've got that soul in us, that ability to speak and communicate. We are marvellously and wonderfully made, and we don't have to be a superstar to know that. We don't have to be somebody that everybody knows. We are known to God, and we have been made, and we are known to the person who made us. And there are plenty more psalms that I could quote. If you're feeling guilty, then Psalm 51, which is a Lenten psalm and appears in morning prayer, will help us, because we mess up, don't we? We've had confession this morning, and probably already, I'm sure I'm guilty, that we've had bad thoughts. Something happens. But God knows that we are human beings. He made us as human beings. And we're not puppets, and that's also something to be grateful for. We're not robots, and we're seeing now with AI coming in how robotic things, we need that human touch, and we perhaps yearn for it. But we will mess up, but we can be forgiven. And so Psalm 51 is quite a helpful one there that we heard on Ash Wednesday, and it's in morning prayer as well. And Psalm 72, I think is the other one, which is one about being old for those of us who are older, and that there's still, God will still hold on to us and knows us, and He's not going to let us go even when we're feeling frail. So we can be delivered from our guilt. We have a God of salvation. If we're secure in this knowledge that God loves us and he made us who we are, and believe it in our hearts, God's love and light will flow from us. And just an example of how that perhaps can happen without us maybe knowing. On Friday evening, we came across a TV programme quite by accident, probably a bit like Mark's wallpaper things, and it was about extraordinary portraits. And I'd not heard of it before, but I was absolutely captivated by it because there was a young artist and she was challenged to paint a portrait of a couple called Martha and Lionel. And they fostered over 200 teenagers in their lives. Sorry, but that's my watch goes off at 12. I'm on my own, that's my prayer time. Sorry. So over 200 teenagers. And what the artist captured by visiting their home and talking with them, and some of the now young adults who passed through their care, was an absolute profound love. Love for each other. It was so clear that they were still in love in their older years, and a great sense of gratitude for those who had loved them. They were so full of gratitude. And it had given them self-worth, and this love flowed out to others. And the couple were old and wrinkled and grey, but this acceptance of who they were and the desire to have this portrayed exposed their love even more. It was genuine and infectious, and those of you who've seen it, I think perhaps will agree, and they looked beautiful. Now, the world wouldn't say they looked beautiful, they wouldn't have seen it, but it just captured the beauty of the human spirit. And I thought, wow, but they knew how to love themselves, they've been loved, and love was flowing. And the teenagers that had come back, well, they were young adults now, just the love flowed from them as well. Their faces were beaming. The smile, you just could not take the smile away from them. So that's something, if you want to go on iPlayer, have a look. It's only half an hour, but it's a real feel-good situation. So that's a sense of gratitude. And I came across something that Michael Ramsey, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, had recommended. This was when things were going a bit pear-shaped for the Church of England, and we were trying to anchor ourselves. And he came up with 5 ways for clergy to look after themselves, but I think it applies to every Christian, so this is for all of us. And they're really simple things. We do them in church all the time, but do we do them intentionally? The first thing was thank God. The second one was confess. And the third one was readiness for humiliation. Fourth one was don't worry about status. And the fifth one, use your sense of humour. And in that list of 5 things, 2 words begin with HUM, humiliation and humour. And that hum prefix is from the Latin, where it has the meaning ground, being earthy. And I think there's something that Michael Ramsey is saying is that just be who we are. We don't need to be somebody great and famous and build ourselves up and expect people to thank us all the time or whatever. We need to be thankful. We need to acknowledge that we aren't always doing things properly. We need that readiness for humiliation. That's hard. That is hard, isn't it? I'm sure we've experienced humiliation and triggers for it. But maybe we should be like Jesus. He was in all sorts of positions of humiliation, but in indeed the temptations we've heard about again today. But he stood firm, anchored to the earth and his God, and was able to stand up and be true. And to use our sense of humour. The thing we have as humans is that we can laugh, or we sort of see it in the animal kingdom, and I'm sure I just think my dog smiled at me a lot. But that smile, that humour that we have is just amazing. And just to quote another song, I do like music, but the song If I Were a Butterfly, we sing it here. I used to sing it at baptisms all the time at High Beach because it has actions and it got all the children going. For you gave me a heart, you gave me a smile, you gave me Jesus and you made me his child. I just thank you, Father, for making me me. It might be a children's song, but we've been given a heart, we've been given a smile, and we've been given Jesus, and we're part of God's family, and God has made us. And there's something in that smile, and that capacity to smile, that is so important. I don't know if you've tried it on trains or in queues. Try and give a smile to someone. In the end, they either look away or they have to give it back to you. It's really hard. With children, just give them a smile. You know, if they're having a tantrum and their parents can't do anything, just give them a smile. It's amazing sometimes, another person. And there's something about, I just believe that the human smile is a way of letting out that love that God has put on our hearts. Because we can only smile when we're feeling all right. And I'm sure, you know, as a child, in a mood and I'm not going to talk to you anymore, and then your brother pokes you, you have to laugh or smile or something. But it's quite hard to resist it. And if you're feeling right, it will come out. So there's something there about that humour. So we need to listen to what's going on inside us. And how are we grateful? How do we show gratitude? How do we notice things to be grateful for when perhaps we're not feeling like that? And there are some Christian practices, and I will let you have a word in a moment, but just to pass on some ideas that help us to perhaps connect with our hearts and our souls. At the end of the day, there's a practice of saying an examen, and that sounds very grand, but basically it's just to look at, what am I grateful for today? What actually has gone right? What have I noticed that's right? What didn't go right? And what can I pray about to God to make sure that tomorrow is a better day? And that just changes how we feel about ourselves. And there are ways of perhaps sometimes jotting things down and just being aware of where God is, listening out, noticing God's presence in our lives. And I'm going to recommend, there's two books which I recommend to you, both by someone called Julia Morant. She's a priest, but she's based at Sarum College in Salisbury. And this is her first one, Listening to Your Life. And there are lots of exercises in this, and I've got one here that I'll recommend you can do at home. But just being really down to earth, that earthiness. And this one, Listening to Your Soul. Again, it's a dip-in book, it's not one to read from cover to cover, but she's got lots of ideas of how, if we're feeling unhopeful, or if we're feeling rejected, or if we're feeling worried, there are ways that we can connect ourselves to God and give it to him and help our souls to recover. And it's about sort of noticing. So the exercise from Listening to Your Life is one called a stained glass window exercise. I'm not going to say much more about it now because I want people to have a chance to talk and ask questions, but I've got copies of it and I do recommend it because it's a way of just knowing yourself at this point in time. Who am I? What's going on in my world at this point in time? What's anchoring me? And that particular exercise will help you in that and help you to love yourself. And if you're struggling with loving yourself, there's the whole practice of spiritual direction, which I'm involved in within the diocese, and I'm a spiritual director. But I've got some leaflets here about how you can perhaps find a spiritual director for yourself. It's not as scary, that director is the wrong word, companion, spiritual guide, someone who will journey with you. Perhaps not in our church because they know a lot about you, someone who you're completely anonymous and they can listen to you. You may not know what to say. I saw my spiritual director on Friday. I wasn't really sure what was going to come out, but just articulating what was on my heart on Friday when I saw her. Just put everything back in, connected things back again, really. And that can be a really helpful practice. And I don't think we do enough about that ministry in church. I am biased, but I think there's something there that we have our walking companions who we perhaps go for walks with, we have our friends who we do this, that and the other with, but sometimes it's quite hard to talk about our soul. And so finding someone to whom you can do that with is really, really helpful. So that's my thoughts and reflections. Over to you. Any questions? Any points to bring up?
First of all, I was going to say, first of all, you said about being okay, you don't need to be special. And then you moved on to saying that we should be, love ourselves like as God made us. So you were saying about accepting ourselves as just being ordinary and then loving ourselves. I was thinking, isn't it sufficient? We don't have to love ourselves just to maybe like ourselves and be okay with ourselves. What do you think? What do you say to that?
I think we'd use the word love. Because like isn't as powerful. We can like someone, but we might not love them. If we only like ourselves, I think we're doing ourselves out of the love that's there for us.
And then you can also say, like, to love yourself means maybe like a vanity, like a conceitedness.
Yeah.
And you're always like humble and to be loving yourself. Sometimes, I don't know if you can see it like that.
Well, I think you're right. I think that's sort of, you've used the word conceit, that's a really good way of putting it. Selfish, we're very tempted to perhaps be conceited about ourselves and big ourselves up. But I think if we love ourselves anchored in God, then it's the right love. And that love, it becomes a compassionate love. We're asked to be compassionate to our neighbours. We need to be compassionate to ourselves as well. And I think we're very pressured in our society to put ourselves last at our own peril, really. And we all, perhaps people who are burnt out, people who have breakdowns, they've pushed everything to the limit, and their own soul hasn't been looked after. And that's also about other people noticing that as well, because we don't always notice that ourselves. And it often takes a breakdown or something really major to bring us up short. So, and in a sense, that's another form of safeguarding, that we're looking out. If we're noticing that someone looks as if they're burning out, or that they're really only liking themselves, not loving themselves, then perhaps we need to find a way of supporting them and being neighbourly, but actually helping them to put back that love in their lives.
I'm just sitting here thinking about how it's not exact, I can't give the exact quotation, it's maybe a prayer. Christ has no hands but your hands. Christ has no feet but your feet. Yeah. And this makes me think that actually we all have a role in, how do we develop a sense of being loved? We develop this sense of being loved through our parenting, mothers, our fathers. That's how it starts. Yeah. That may go wrong. I know parents work from the best of intentions and they want the best, but it doesn't always go as straightforwardly as but this is the basic way in which the child learns, yes, you are valued, you are loved, you have esteem, you are equipped to go out into the world, and there is backup, we are here. I feel very much as if what you're talking about is the next intellectual step. You know what I mean? The stuff about the knowledge of God, and you're right, of course that's right. I can't believe it. I think I'm sort of saying that it behoves all of us to show that very practical love, and that very practical, and I'm thinking that as if we were parents, or like you were saying just now about sort of watching out for people who may be struggling. It behooves us all to sort of be, in a sense, aware of our neighbour, of the person next to us, of what's going on. I was also struck by what you said about the smile. I was in a hospital appointment on Friday afternoon, which all went fine. But as you know, when you arrive at the hospital, you've got your bits of paper. Yes, you are at the right place. Yes, you should be here for this appointment. And the girl behind the desk was clearly busy. She had a phone by her. She was a hairdresser. And she looked at me, how can I help you for this appointment? And she said, oh, it's round there. And she smiled at me. And I was thinking, well, presumably she's waiting, listening for somebody on the other end of this phone. But she smiled at me. And I felt I'd been given something. And I thought, yes, right, we could pass that on, like you were saying in the queue.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be words sometimes, does it? What do you think?
I think a smile is so special, and also when somebody calls you your name, I think that makes me cry when somebody calls me my name, because it just makes you think, oh, okay, I'm here, rather than invisible.
Yeah.
And it's only tiny. It means so much, I think. It means so much.
That call by name, you have the resurrection story when Jesus said Mary.
Yeah.
And that's really powerful, isn't it? Because there is something, and we've been called by name. We're not anonymous.
Jill, you pretty much really answered my question about loving yourself and just liking yourself. But I was thinking yesterday, sometimes you have like a disability or another condition, loving yourself and liking yourself can be an extra challenging. Because say you like to have something like a condition like autism, and part that you have an overwhelming, that can make you act of character. And so you have a physical impact, like mobility, you would get a lot of pain. And you were saying all these things, it's not like yourself, and you don't feel like yourself, and you can't be yourself. So having to live with that, to be a normal, kind of easy to like love yourself, to like yourself. When you're dealing with this kind of disability, it's like you're having to have these things happening to you, you have to deal with them. It can be difficult sometimes as well.
Yeah.
One of those, you were talking about Bill Bailey and the portraits. I think the first or the second one was a young lady with Down syndrome.
Oh, right, I haven't
think
seen it.
it was. It's been a beautiful programme. And she said at the very end, he's painted me. He's painted who I am.
Yeah.
You know, it was quite moving that she glowed.
Yeah.
And going back, I mean, when I first started to come here, which was quite a long time ago now, but I'd been going to Woodford Bridge, and I just felt I needed to change. And Chris Woodward, one morning, he said, oh, good morning, Georgina. And I thought, oh, I'm me. I'm not just somebody walking through the door. And that made a really big impression on me.
Yeah.
That I mattered here.
Yeah. So that naming again, isn't
Yes,
it?
yes.
And who we are. And I think, with disabilities and so many hidden disabilities, I think we're becoming more aware now in our society. But yes, I think it's about sort of being compassionate and understanding, not judgmental. And we are who we are. And I think it is, we learning to love ourselves. It is perhaps learning to love ourselves, because we may have been taught not to really love ourselves. And I think as Christians, it's loving ourselves with that anchor of God. And really, I think through prayer is the way that we can learn to love ourselves, because as we're communicating with God and hearing scriptures and so on, it just reminds us and connects us to that truth and to what Jesus was really teaching us about God's love. And it's not because the world thinks that you're only worth something if you earn lots of money, or if you rise to the sort of heights of your job, or if you're top this or head that or captain of this. It can make you feel very small. And I'm sure we've all had experiences in school when perhaps we were the ones that didn't necessarily comes through, or maybe we've had a taste of being at the top and then we're no longer at the top. There's those sort of things to contend with, but it's actually about how we deal with it in those situations that we find ourselves in. And they're holding on to the fact that God knows exactly what's going on. He knows the truth, and He knows us inside out. We don't need to have millions of words of confession. We can use that very simple prayer, Jesus have mercy on me, I'm a sinner. He knows, but it's acknowledging it. It's being, I think, an honesty with ourselves as well.
I think a way in to loving ourselves, given that we're always thinking, oh, I shouldn't be selfish, I shouldn't put myself first, and all those things. If you think about somebody you care for, and it could be a stranger or somebody you live with, somebody you just care for them, you think of all the things that you would do as their carer, in inverted commas. You want them to eat properly, you want them to be warm, you want them to be entertained, you want them to have a whole balance of things in their life which make them feel contented in their way. So if you turn that inwardly and say, well, our needs are exactly the same, so we need to eat nutritious foods, we need to, do all those things, go and see the latest film or whatever. It just kind of does that to us without feeling too uncomfortable. It's almost like a sort of discipline, really, of trying to just be ourselves in the most natural way.
Yes, it's a mirroring what you're doing to others.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if it follows on. I was just thinking about the times in our life when we've been struggling, or when we've had to face loss or bereavement or very deep disappointment, and those can feel like negative aspects of life. But I think what I try to hold on to is the sense that in some ways going through the tough times can help us to reach out and connect with other people who are also going through rough times. So, the idea that nothing is wasted.
Yeah.
And that sometimes the experiences that we think, well, actually, I'd rather not have had that experience.
Yes.
In a strange way, it's giving us a different kind of gift.
Yes.
But it's not necessarily the gift that we would have wanted. I don't know if that's...
No, that's exactly. In fact, that fits in.
But it's about accepting, and we probably all, to some extent, have this experience in life, because life is challenging. That life doesn't necessarily turn out in the way that you might have expected or hoped or wanted, but it's about sort of accepting that that is the path that I'm on, me individually, and how can I transform this into something actually that is about flourishing and that's meaningful and positive and turning outwards rather than turning inwards.
That's really helpful, because this exercise called a stained glass window exercise, it's picking up on that fact that this is an apology for a sort of stained glass window in terms of think of a rose window in one of the big cathedrals, and the light pours in, and it tends to pour in to the centre. So this exercise asks you to put what anchors you in your faith, and there's that. Then around the outside, there's all the sort of things that just bring lots of light to you, the wider bits of window where the light pours in. So what things, this suggestion of 7 things, what pours through and things are going well. And then in stained glass windows, there are always darker bits, aren't there? And it changes. So you're asked to look at those darker bits, you know, like 7 things that where things aren't going so well, that are challenging and you haven't really dealt with or come to terms with or are annoyed with God at, or you know, think, hold on, what's happening to me? And so there's it's a chance to be honest with yourself. No one has to see this. And the idea is that yes, you've got light things and dark things, but sometimes when the light shines through differently, it actually goes through into some of those darker bits, and then you suddenly see a way forward. And it's a helpful means of looking at prayer. And I've got some sort of reflections and things if you want to do this, but it's a really helpful way of just unpicking those good things and bad things, because I don't think any of us can really put our hands on our heart and say that, well, today there's no darkness in my soul, the light's shining through completely. Some days it feels much lighter than others, but there will be those bits that we've hidden, and maybe we're not even aware of that we're hiding or hurting. But it's good to bring them before God, because God knows. He knows everything about who we are, our name, our feelings, what's happening to us, why we're distressed, why we're joyful, why we're a mix of the two, why we're not sure what to do. And it really is a way of teasing that out. And quite often it is the real trials that we've dealt with that in the end enable us to shine through and be a good neighbour to someone else, because there's that sort of empathy there as well as just something happening.
Could I come back to the issue of liking and loving? Because I think we could bring up a difference in different kind. So I'm probably not alone in thinking that there have been times when I have not liked myself very much. I've done something I'm ashamed of. Usually I've managed to forgive myself quite quickly. Would I forgive anybody else quite so quickly? I don't know. Now, had I done something like running over a child, I probably would not. I'd probably be haunted by it. But short of doing something like that, I have usually managed to get over these feelings of not liking myself. But I don't think I've stopped loving myself. The times when I didn't like myself, I think they're two totally different. Well, maybe one's an emotion and one is more cerebral.
Yes.
But they're different in kind.
When we go back to childhood, I think it's so important that we try and almost, although we're all adults, we try and sort of still feel like a child still. And having worked with children all my career, I would say that children have got this wonderful sense of living in the present and just seeing life as it is. And you know, you might have little children going home with a painting, and they can you might not know what they've painted because it's just a child's painting, but they're full of what they've done and proud of what they've done, and hopefully somebody who sees that will feel the same on their behalf as well. But they don't think, oh, that my painting's not as good as that person's. Somehow a little child, usually, and I know everybody's had different experiences and things, but a little child is kind of contented with who they are. And as you grow up, somebody then might give you the impression that perhaps you're not quite as good at that as you thought you might have been as a small child. And that can bring about this sort of comparison. But it's lovely when little children don't even compare themselves to other children, they're just who they are. And somehow as adults we need to perhaps get that back into our thought process more.
Thank you. I'm very conscious of the time, and I've got a song by Bernadette Farrell, Everyday God, which I thought would be a way of closing the discussion and allow people to go off to lunches and things, and I'll hang around for a bit afterwards, if it works. And you just saw me mess up there, so I'm sorry I interrupted there. Was it God in everything, noticing God in everything, I think helps us to love ourselves as well, that we notice God in us. And there's one phrase in one of the verses, God of laughter, again, that sort of humour. If I can't get it quickly, it's...
Thank you for the meeting, Joe.
Pleasure. Thanks for coming.